Hello. We had a request about generating multiple IEC constraints for use of ParkOptimizer. This feature is not currently implemented in ParkOptimizer, but it can still be performed by some small fix. So I will now demonstrate how you can do this. If we look at IEC constraints, there is a list of constraints, parameter settings that you can insert. So this one is already generated. You can see the map here, and we can also save this to a file. So I will save this to the IEC 0. That's a CSV command separated file. And this one we can also import into ParkOptimizer again at a later stage. Now, if I want to generate a different constraint, let's say I want, instead of having one standard IEC constraint, I want to define, let's say, a new set of constraints that is not as constraining. Let's say shear. Let's say we allow higher shear values and compensate that with lower turbulence intensity. Then we can extract a new map, exclusion area, and we can save that. So now we have generated a new set of IEC constraints, as you can see from the picture here, and let's save this as IEC constraints set number 1. And that will be saved as a command separated file. So this command separated file appears like this. The format is XY coordinates command separated, and that's it. So each point here is in effect an exclusion area. Now let's take another set of constraints. Let's say that, well, if the shear is not too high, let's say there is a more narrow range of shear, then we can maybe allow for high turbulence. So, or maybe I should allow not 20 but 17 like this, and then we can generate these constraints and save this new set of constraints correspondingly. Now we have generated a new set of constraints, IEC constraints. So let's store this as well. Let's call it IEC set number 2. And we can continue to generate as many constraints that we want. So, but the trick now is that to optimize with these different combination of IEC constraints would be the equivalent of superimposing these IEC constraints together, and hopefully the combined set of IEC constraints will be less restricting than the standard IEC constraints. So this we can do outside of ParkOptimizer, and we can superimpose those individual IEC constraints, and we can import the combined constraints into ParkOptimizer again, and then continue running from there. You can use either some programming language to manipulate the data, or Excel's spreadsheet, or I'll use Google spreadsheet. That will be more or less the same as an Excel spreadsheet. So let's have a look at that now. With Google Doc here, I have imported the CSV file of the standard IEC constraint. So here you have a set of points that is represent an exclusion points of on the wind map. So here I made just a scatter plot to visualize this. Now let's import the two set of constraints, IEC constraints that we generated. So let's see here. So let's look at CSV files. So here I have IEC constraint set number 1. So there we go with the first sheet. Then I will import the second one. And now we need to superimpose this set of constraints. Let's see, that was imported into a different spreadsheet. Let's just copy this. Okay, so one way of doing this is just using the command unique. Let's say, I think that exists also in Google or in Excel, Microsoft spreadsheet. Let's say we find a unique data points from the range IC1 spreadsheet from A1 to, let's see, how big is the range, 2877. And then we also want to include second set, which has a range from, let's see, 3114. This. And here we have the new combined set of constraints. Now let's just make a plot of that to see how it looks like. Looks all right. And let's just export this as a CSV file and then we can import it into ParkOptimizer again. Now, see, I export this. Try export it again. Download as concept values. Yeah, here we go. So this is the name for the constraint. I just put it in the same folder as I had for the test case. Here we go. And this is the new combined constraints file. So now with ParkOptimizer, I open a new set of constraints. And here can you see the new set of constraints, which is I think less constraining than the original standard IEC constraint. So now we can continue and perform the optimization with the new combined set of constraints.